Welcome to the Visionary Chronicles, a podcast dedicated to uncovering the strategies and insights that drive innovative, disruptive businesses. Join us as we explore the mindsets, cultures, and solutions powering the next generation of industry leaders and creative trailblazers. Whether you're seeking to inject new life into your organization or spark transformative growth, the Visionary Chronicles is your guide to executable, cutting-edge business strategy. Hello and welcome to the Visionary Chronicles. Thanks for being with me today. I know your time is precious, as we all have very little of it. So I appreciate you being with me today. Today will be a fun episode. And this comes from my new book release. It's The Visionary Leader, the Success Principles of the World's Greatest Visionaries. And I am proud to announce The Visionary Leader just made Amazon #1 bestseller for a business category list. So I want to first thank you, all of those who purchased the book, the ebook, and its launch and success throughout the past several months. It's greatly appreciated, as always. But as I always say, the most important thing is hearing from you as to how you've applied some of the principles that are outlined in the book. Just as you had done with the Visionary brand, my first book. That by far gives me the most pleasure in the success of the book, is the reach of the book. But also the success of the book that comes through you applying it on your day-to-day, both personally and professionally. There's a lot of great visionaries. There's obviously a lot more I could have profiled. But what I found most interesting in the book, and you'll see in the book, is that I looked at generational visionaries, not just our current visionaries we think of today. So I go all the way back to Jesus, to Socrates, to Leonardo da Vinci that we'll talk about today. So it's a pretty broad blend and mix of visionaries. I hope you find it interesting and intriguing. And I think that's probably the comments that I've gotten the most from the books is I didn't realize these visionaries had impacted our world so much that we use today. So that's an interesting thing to think about as you read the book is, boy, there's a lot of things that these visionaries created that although generational, we still use today. So today, let's get into the podcast today. So today we're going to do and profile a visionary outline in the book Leonardo da Vinci, and I call it the ultimate Renaissance visionary. So welcome to the Visionary Chronicles, where we discuss the minds, the methods, and the legacies of history's most innovative and forward-thinking visionaries. Today's content, as I'd mentioned, is drawn from my new book on business leadership, The Visionary Leader, the Success Principles of the World's Greatest Visionaries, where I profile legendary visionaries like Leonardo da Vinci we're talking about today. And over the next few weeks, I will continue to release these podcasts that we talk about and profile these visionaries from the book. So hopefully you enjoy today's episode. It's a really interesting one. And I just don't think, and hopefully you come away with, as I was hoping in the book, realizing all that Leonardo da Vinci did, not only during his time, but also what we use today. So today we're examining one of the most, what I call, extraordinary minds in human history, Leonardo da Vinci. And I always start out with a quote, and obviously we need one from Da Vinci. And Da Vinci once said, "Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication." And this philosophy really is infused, and you'll see today, everything he created. We'll explore how this Renaissance polymath transformed multiple, not just one, multiple disciplines, and what practical lessons today's modern leaders can extract from his life and work. And going back to the quote for a second, what I love about it is this is almost verbatim what Steve Jobs said, where simple is sophisticated. So it's effectively the same quote, but what I love about it is Steve was influenced by Leonardo da Vinci and all of his creations. So you'll see, and what you'll see in the book as well, is how the integration of all these visionaries over the generations applied to one another and how they picked up on their principles for them to succeed in their life. So let's talk about Leonardo da Vinci. Let's talk about what I call this making of a visionary. We'll go back to his early years, and I think it's important because it gives you context around when and where Leonardo created these visionary ideas and actually commercialized many of them for us. So Leonardo da Vinci was born on April 15th, 1452 in Vinci, Italy. And interestingly enough, he received no formal education, as many other visionaries have not, which became one of his greatest strengths because he was then unbridled or unburdened by rigid thinking. His mind remained open and unconfined by conventional wisdom. So he didn't always conform to the real world. He wanted to understand what the future looked like. He became an apprentice to Andrea del Verrocchio in Florence, contributing to the works like the Baptism of Christ while developing the innovative techniques that would define his masterpieces, including the Mona Lisa and the Last Supper. So what were some of his key influences? I always wonder about that in these visionaries. Early on, what were some of their key influences? So we can kind of look back on, well, what were some of my early influences? Or even in today's world, in your current life, what are some things that should be influencing me, but they're not? And I want you to look at that with Leonardo when I go through these. Number one is he had a lack of formal education, as I'd mentioned earlier, which allowed for unconventional thinking patterns. So even if you have a formal education, I want you to understand that you need to have unconventional thinking in order to be innovative. You can't think of what currently has been commercialized. You have to think in terms of what I call future casting. What needs to be commercialized to make the human more effective, more efficient, and can process faster. And apprenticeship provided technical mastery with creative freedom was the second thing, which was an influence for Leonardo. Number three was he lived in Florence, which had a Renaissance culture which really encouraged cross-disciplinary innovation. So the context of this one would be looking at how Apple created the Macintosh. They separated the innovation team from the rest of the world. They had one thing to do, and that was to commercialize this new computer. A singular team with a singular focus. That's what, back in the day, Florence was like in that culture. Early success for Leonardo allowed him to have bold experimentation. And that's a really important thing as well, is that promote successes, no matter how small. Even a failure should be promoted as a success if it leads you closer to commercializing a disruptive technology. And the development of meticulous observation skills. And you'll see a little bit, I'll expound upon that a little bit more later, but he had unbelievable observation skills, meaning adaptation, I call it. And I talked about that on several other podcasts on the product innovation side. And what you need to do is not look at competitors. You need to observe where you can use Mother Nature or some other product inspiration that will allow you to adapt something to your product or your service, whatever it may be. And I also like to break down these visionaries into pillars of thinking. What led to their genius? So let's talk about these three pillars of Da Vinci's genius. When we analyze what made Da Vinci such a brilliant visionary, three fundamental qualities really emerge when you start looking at him that any leader can cultivate. So I want you to look at these, but look at them in the context of Leonardo da Vinci. The first is pillar number one, which is innovative thinking. Leonardo's innovative thinking wasn't random creativity. It was systematic imagination applied to real-world problems. Let me tell you that again. because the context of it is extremely important when you start looking at ideation. Many times I've been in it with Liquid Mind and brands that we work with, as well as brands that I worked for. Oakley was probably the best at it, but also K-Swiss, TaylorMade, Adidas, Nike, all these brands that I worked with. And ones that we currently work with Liquid Mind in mastermind groups or ideation programs. Leonardo's innovative thinking wasn't random creativity. It was systematic imagination applied to real-world problems. That's unbelievable when you think about it. I mean, for me in particular, being a product and marketing guy, it's one that I look at where I say, hey, that's a great drawing, but your drawing's only as good as your ability to commercialize it and either innovate in your industry or create a disruptive technology. Does it do either of those, or is it just a drawing? Leonardo was always challenged with that question. He conceptualized, think about this. He conceptualized flying machines, armored vehicles, and engineering marvels centuries before the technology existed to even build them. Now, that is an imagination that I have in my lifetime, and all the visionaries I profiled I've ever seen beyond that is Edison. So when you look at this, Da Vinci was like Steve Jobs blended with Thomas Edison. Think about that creative genius. He didn't wait for perfect conditions before developing ideas. This willingness to think beyond current constraints is the most critical characteristic of true visionary thinking. His notebooks, which sold for millions, contained designs for helicopters, and this was around 1480. Parachutes, submarines, countless mechanical innovations. You know, when historians tested his parachute design using Renaissance-era materials in our current world, it actually worked. His flying machines, inspired by careful bird studies, anticipated principles eventually applied to aircraft design. And a good example of that was the B-2, the hawk. Look at the belly of a hawk and the head of a hawk, and look at its side when it's flying with his wings behind its neck. It looks like a B-2 bomber from the side. Look at it. It's unbelievable. This was things that Leonardo da Vinci applied to design that we are using in our practical world today. So how do you, as a leader, cultivate this innovation thinking with your team? And I don't care if it's accounting or if it's product, whatever it happens to be in a functional area, anybody can do this. You just need to have the will and the authentication to implement it and work it with your team. First is that you question fundamental assumptions about how things must work. The second thing is you study problems from multiple angles before settling on a solution. Keep thinking, finding solutions. You'll be surprised by looking at how many angles you can solve a problem that you maybe thought at first was the solution when in fact it wasn't. Third is imagine possibilities unconstrained by current limitations. And this goes back to Leonardo designing things that weren't even part of technological practicality at the time. Combine insights with unrelated fields. Document ideas immediately, even if impractical. Leonardo carried his notebook with him 24/7, and why it's so valuable. And view failures, this is the last one, and probably the most important for our current day culture because we're so risk adverse. View failures as temporary rather than permanent. Reward failure. Yes, I said reward failure. Not enough companies do this, and everybody should. The second pillar is humanism and human-centered approach. So What this is about is Leonardo's fascination with human anatomy, reflected a deeply human-centered approach that he had to all of his work. He dissected approximately 30 human corpses in order to create anatomical drawings so accurate they remained relevant for medical education purposes centuries later. He was the first, as a result of that, he was the first to describe heart valve function correctly and documented the spine with unprecedented accuracy. Think if he had not done that early on. Again, this is in the 15th century. This human-centered perspective that Da Vinci had meant everything. He created design with deep consideration for human needs and experiences. He just didn't create for the fun of it. He knew what he was designing and creating could be applied to human need, and it would solve current day and future problems. His flying machines weren't abstract exercises. They were attempts to give humans the capability of birds. In modern terms, we call this user-centered design or empathetic innovation. So how do you apply this human-centered thinking? And not a lot of people think of it that way. They just think of creating a product as an incremental improvement or an innovation. But if nobody adopts it and nobody needs it, it's not really anything that solves a problem, and it's not human-centered thinking. So I'm going to give you a few points in here to apply this with your team. Is begin projects by deeply understanding human needs. That's number one. Number two is you'll need to test ideas with real people and observe responses. You don't want to ask leading questions. You don't want this to be lawyerism when you're trying to innovate or during your ideation process. And you need to connect innovations to fundamental human aspirations. What do people want to do, but they can't? Think about that question. If you're a product company and you know that aspirationally a human would like to climb a mountain vertically, how would you go about solving that solution? And maybe things aren't practical, but neither is disruption, and why there's so few disruptions in our industry. So connect innovations to fundamental human aspirations and their inspiration. And pillar number 3 is boundarylessness and integration. Leonardo's most distinctive characteristic was refusing to recognize boundaries between disciplines. And what I mean by this is he had no separation between art and science, between theory and practice, between observation and imagination. He was an artist who understood that anatomy creates more realistic figures, understand that an engineer who appreciates aesthetic designs more elegant machines, a scientist who can visualize complex systems makes more intuitive breakthroughs, and an artist who understands anatomy creates more realistic figures. So the more you understand, the more effective you are in creating something that's practical through human interaction and aspiration by inspiring design. His famous Vitruvian Man, drawing perfectly, symbolizes this integration. Simultaneously, it was an artistic masterpiece, mathematical study, an anatomical reference, and a philosophical statement, all at once. The most transformative innovations typically occurred at the intersections of fields, not within established centers of discipline. So how do you develop this boundarylessness capacity? Well, first, you need to actively study fields outside of your primary expertise. Increase your capacity to learn, not just by a singular discipline, but by multiple disciplines where you can apply this to your ideation process, your innovation pipeline, product design, and interpret this to your team. So be more effective, more efficient through crossing boundaries on disciplines. The second is you collaborate with people from different disciplines. Get outside your box and talk to other people in other functional groups and areas. Understand people's pain points. The third, which people don't do enough of, and I think it's one of the biggest weaknesses of leaders to becoming visionary, is read broadly across subjects, not just your specialization. Means, although you're in marketing, read a product design book. Although you're in product, read a marketing book as a start. And you'll want to view various skills as complementary, not competing with one another. So the more broad spectrum of expertise that you have, the more you understand the need of the human discipline. So let's look at some of those revolutionary contributions across disciplines that Leonardo da Vinci impacted, which is incredible. So Leonardo's artistic innovations transformed visual expression forever. So what's interesting, and I'll tell you here in a minute with his paintings that people aren't aware of, is that the Mona Lisa captivates people through his revolutionary techniques of blending colors so subtly that the painting seems to shift and change. I haven't had the privilege of actually going to see the Mona Lisa, but that's what people say when they talk about the Mona Lisa, when they say, how is it different? Well, he created human emotion inside of a painting. The Last Supper captured not just the moment, but the psychological drama of betrayal at the time, with each disciple revealing distinct emotions. Look at the Last Supper. It's extremely impactful painting, but there's significant emotion behind the painting that Da Vinci wanted people to look at. Again, going back to the beauty is in the details. His scientific work revealed extraordinary curiosity. And I love the word curiosity whenever we talk about designers. So beyond anatomy, he studied water flow with such precision he could sketch turbulent currents mathematically, examined rock formations. He theorized about geographical processes. He observed birds and documented flight mechanics. His botanical investigations, although maybe not the most exciting things, captured not just appearance, but growth patterns and structural logic. So it's incredible the broad discipline that Da Vinci had in his inventions, his concepts, and his ideas. What I wanted you to see was everybody that I talked to thought he was just an artist. Very few outside of the visionaries knew everything that Da Vinci accomplished. So what were some of those Da Vinci key innovations that he had completed at the time? So these are just some, but not all. I mean, I could be here all day if we're talking about Vinci's inventions and innovations at the time. You know, the first is this artistry technique that revolutionized the artistic realism movement. And he also had, secondly, groundbreaking anatomical studies, including cardiovascular systems. So he's got medical, art, engineering designs from flying machines to hydraulic systems, engineering, scientific observations in geology, biology, and botany and fluid dynamics. The Vitruvian Man, symbolizing art and science integration. And systematic documentation in notebooks spanning all of his interest for us to have, to review, to implement, and to admire. So what does this Da Vinci method look like for modern leaders today? I'll give you a few pointers here and think of things that you do or things that you don't do that you should do. So I'm going to give you a few pointers here on what this method that Da Vinci used for your day-to-day, and hopefully improve not only the systems and processes that you put in place, but allow you to execute these with precision. So the first is always maintain idea notebooks. Capture observations and ideas daily without self-censorship. The second is practice detailed observation. Get outside. Steve did it all the time. I tell you that probably if I were to ask and sit down with Steve Jobs and say, who is your biggest inspiration? I would be willing to bet it was Leonardo da Vinci. So he practiced detailed observation, carefully observed systems and processes in your field, and engaged with Mother Nature on all of her creations. Cross-pollinate knowledge is the third. Study fields adjacent and distant from your expertise. Branch out in your expertise, you'll become more valuable to your team. And the fourth is question systematically. What I mean by that is ask why and what if about fundamental assumptions people have. And the fifth is embrace experimentation. This really gets towards safe is risky. In order for you to have success in anything, you need to take risks. You cannot avoid risk. There wasn't one thing. Now that I've got the abstract for my next book, The Visionary Product, there's not been one visionary product invented that didn't cross the bridge from risk to failure to risk to failure to success. Fail faster, succeed sooner should be your mantra. And studies nature's solutions. Look to natural systems for elegant solutions. I outline that in the book as well, where you look at many times people are trying to sit inside the four walls of an ideation. I always take the teams outside. And very quickly, these creative minds understand why I've done that. It opens up a whole new world for them to understand the natural systems for elegant solutions based on nature. The next is integrate art and analytics. Combine quantitative data with qualitative insight. One is abstract, one is real. Combine quantitative data with qualitative insight. And next is think in systems. Understand how components relate, not just individual functions. The next is allow for reflection time. Close the door, shut the lights off, and think. 30 minutes alone is amazing. How much creative juice you come out of in a 30-minute session in the dark, sitting by yourself, reflecting. So build contemplation periods for connecting ideas. Get away from people and be very open about this creative process that you go through. And the last is document your process. Keep records of thinking evolution, not just conclusion. How do you evolve your ideas? What's the process that you go through to realize an innovation? And you can adapt ideas from Da Vinci to do this. How did he do it? So all of these things, what do we look at when we think about the legacy of Leonardo da Vinci? He died on May 2nd, 1519, but his influence extends undiminished into our contemporary world. Many of the things that he invented, ideas he had, we still use today. Flying machines that we call airplanes. Overhead blade systems that we call helicopters. And safety systems that we call parachutes. Think about that. It's amazing. He's just not the Mona Lisa and Last Supper guy. He proved that depth in one area doesn't need to come to an expense of breadth across multiple areas. He demonstrated that integrating diverse knowledge creates insights unavailable to narrow specialists who don't have that broad expertise. He really showed the profound innovations that he had come from those who see patterns others miss. And Steve Jobs and many other visionaries talk about this process. Elon Musk, and you go through that, and I profile these visionaries. They see things that others miss. And really what that means, and Da Vinci's saying here, is futurecast. Understand what the future looks like. You are the visionary inside of the company that they look to see where the future is and how you're going to get there. You're the visionary. Plus, you have the path to how you're going to achieve your goal. Now, it always won't be a straight line. I talk about the switchback management, but never losing sight of your destination. In our specialized world, Leonardo's example reminds us of the power of generalist thinking. Really, if you look at today's challenges, climate change, AI ethics, sustainable development are all fundamentally interdisciplinary and require Da Vinci-like thinking to solve. They demand people who can bridge art and science, connect human needs with technological capabilities, and envision possibilities beyond current constraints. So what does this look like as far as an impact? Where did Da Vinci put a dent in the universe, as Steve would say? He established the art scientist engineer as a valuable model that people should aspire to. He also demonstrated that observation and experimentation unlock nature's secrets. That's a beautiful thing when you think about it. Get outside. Get outside with Mother Nature. Get out there and see the beautiful creations that she has flying around on the ground right in front of you that you've never observed before. He created techniques foundational to multiple disciplines. He proved constraints needn't limit your visionary thinking. He created artworks that continue moving people across all cultures to this day. So I always say, how do we apply this to our day-to-day? This somebody as brilliant as Da Vinci. And I get that comment many times, interestingly enough, when people read the book or we go through these ideation processes. I do a lot of these, with Liquid Mind and the brands that we work with, global brands, entrepreneurial brands, whatever it is. We just like to unlock their visionary thinking. And many times we just get a blank stare because so few companies have implemented this process and or understand how to develop a process and or who's the inspiration for developing a process to innovating in your industry. So I say, what's your Da Vinci journey? What are your next steps here? What do you need to do? So let me give you a few. The striking truth about Leonardo's genius is that while his practical combination of talents was unique, really the fundamental approaches are valuable to anyone willing to cultivate them, and you can. You don't need to paint like Leonardo. I certainly can't, but I've taken a lot of his principles in our ideation process with Liquid Mind and brands that I've been with. Or design flying machines like he did, but you can adopt his mindset, methods, and commitments. You just understand how he did it. So start today, by choosing one area outside of your expertise and commit to learning about it. Seriously. Begin keeping a notebook where you can capture observations, questions, and ideas daily. It's just a beautiful thing to look back on. Even if impractical, it doesn't matter. It's a sketch pad. Practice looking at challenges from multiple disciplinary perspectives. Most importantly, give yourself permission to think beyond current limitations. And imagine possibilities others that they dismiss as impossible. It's either possible or it's impossible. It's your frame of mind. And I go back to Henry Ford, where he said, think you can, think you can't. Either way, you're right. So Leonardo didn't achieve greatness overnight. He built it through decades of consistent curiosity, careful observation, systematic documentation, and courageous experimentation. And this path is a path that you can take steps towards. It's available to anyone willing to walk this path that Da Vinci has created for us. So let me give you some closing thoughts here on the podcast today. I think it's extremely valuable to kind of talk a lot about today, that you kind of get a key takeaways here. So again, another great quote from Leonardo was, he once wrote, "Learning never exhausts the mind." And it's, again, another beautiful quote from Leonardo, because many people think, I'm just so tired. But thinking doesn't exhaust, or learning never exhausts the mind. It's something that you have a passion around. So this captures the essence of his visionary nature. And it's really an appetite for understanding, unbounded curiosity about the world, and his commitment to continuous growth. He embodied the belief that pursuing knowledge across multiple disciplines wasn't a distraction from mastery, but really, rather, it was a path to achieving it. So as we kind of navigate this complex, really rapidly changing world, I get it. Whether it's time, whether it's knowledge, whatever it happens to be, Leonardo's example offers both inspiration and practical guidance for you on how to achieve that step by step. You don't have to do it all at once, but start taking these steps that Leonardo has taken for us to follow. His life reminds us that true innovation comes from the courage to explore broadly, connect disparate ideas, and imagine possibilities others cannot yet see. And I get it, very few have that skill set, but you can certainly start working towards it. The boundaries between disciplines are human constructs, not natural limitations. The things and barriers that you put in front of yourself, self-imposed, not things that were imposed by someone else. So the future really belongs to those who, like Leonardo, can transcend those boundaries that others put in front of them. So again, thank you for joining me on the Visionary Chronicles. If, really Leonardo's story inspired you, pick up your notebook today and begin your journey of what I call this systematic observation and exploration. And we're going to have many more visionaries that we'll be profiling over the next few weeks. But this is what we talk about at the Visionary Chronicles. So if you find it inspiring, we hope you stick with us or tell others about it. And more stories of greatest visionaries and innovators and practical lessons they offer for modern leaders to adapt to their life today. So some of the takeaways, again, with Leonardo, are his visionary genius emerged from three cultivatable qualities that you can put into your day-to-day. Innovative thinking unconstrained by human limitations, human-centered observation and empathy, and integration of diverse knowledge. Those are three great takeaways from what we talked about today. So again, if this episode resonated with you, I encourage you to grab a copy. This was inspired from and copy from my new book, The Visionary Leader, The Success Principles of the World's Greatest Visionaries. It's available now wherever books are sold. It's a perfect companion, really, for those looking to reignite their purpose or lead with more clarity in this complex world. So, and as a thank you for the podcast listeners and all those who want to read the book and want the convenience of having an electronic version, we have the ebook now for $1.99. And actually, I want to announce it today. Through the request of our publisher, we've also now launched the audiobook. So for those of you who are in the car and want to listen to the audiobook, that is now available as well as of this week, actually. I just got notification of that. So this book is a culmination, really, of decades of research, experiences, really real-world insights that I've had, and what makes leaders like Steve Jobs, Leonardo da Vinci, Elon Musk, Abraham Lincoln truly visionary. That's what the book is all about. And you can easily apply some of the principles and concepts that we talk about and that we profile in the book. So your support means the world, obviously, and your purchase goes a long way in helping us to spread the vision even further. So the Visionary Chronicles, where the future is created by those bold enough to shape it. So until next time, keep innovating. As I always say, keep leading, keep shaping the future. Thank you for your continued support, and I look forward to hearing from you. And always stay true, stay authentic, be different, and be great, but enjoy the journey along the way. Have a great day, and I look forward to the next Visionary Chronicles.